Hey everybody, welcome to another video. I'm sure you guys are all still busy watching that 4-hour Plex Pin Manager video. Did I ever stop finishing teaching that? Not entirely, but that's for another time. It's a little teaser. Welcome to this video. Today this video is going to be covering essentially the dynamic that I use when it comes to my own personal setup in terms of maintaining Radarr and managing website ratios or tracker ratios without blowing the bank on any one website. This video is going to cover kind of the workflow that I use, and you can probably adapt it to your own trackers and create your own sort of workflow. So we're going to cover that right now. In front of me here, I have Prowlarr. As covered in the Sonar and Radarr 2 instances video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please watch that first and then come back here. Prowlarr essentially allows you to add indexers across all the instances of Radarr and Sonar without having to manually go into each one and add them, etc., and all this stuff right here without having to do this whole thing. So I want to show you guys what I do in terms of managing how I grab movies without necessarily blowing the bank on any one tracker. First things first to explain. At the bottom of this list, priority 25, we see high-end cross-seed and movies-only cross-seed. These are the two trackers that are specifically only for cross-seed's tours nav. These were created because, as I'll later explain, these allow cross-seed to see every single torrent. There is no restriction to these trackers in terms of cross-seed. Remember, cross-seed doesn't hurt anything. It can only help. So obviously we don't want to put restrictions there in terms of what it can find to quote-unquote download. And by download, I mean cross-seed. Now with that out of the way, remember, you can ignore this. I want to cover another one you can probably ignore. NYA.SI, as you know, is an anime-only public tracker. This anime-only public tracker only syncs with titles, or only searches or queries for titles, provided that those titles have the anime tag on them. Recall that we set up in the previous video a tag that auto tags anything with the Japanese original language and genre animation as anime. So you can also safely ignore this as well for purposes of this video. So really what we'll be looking at is this chunk here and this first one. Now I want you guys to pay attention to something on the right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, but you notice it can kind of mess it up. But if you see here on the right, you can see that there's tags. This is something you're probably going to want to do right away. In terms of settings, apps, notice I have Radarr 4K, Radarr HD, Sonar 4K, Sonar HD. And they have tags indicating what the application is. I kept it organized. Sonar 4K tag means Sonar 4K. As it relates to Prowlarr, what it means is that these indexers will only sync up with whatever tags they have on them. So if the application has a tag Radarr 4K, this high-end Freeleech only indexer is only going to add itself to Radarr 4K and Radarr HD. Notice Sonar 4K, Sonar HD is missing from that tracker, from that indexer specifically. I'll explain why in a little bit more detail later. Moving forward, I want to show that I have a TV-only tracker here with a priority of 1. Set to Sonar 4K and Sonar HD in terms of the syncing priority. Remember, Prowlarr syncs through tasks right here, application, indexer, sync. There are two modes that Prowlarr uses to sync indexers. There is full sync and there's add and replace only. Add and replace only, I don't recommend because you're getting into kind of a habit of where you're going to create too much customization per app. Not that that's a bad thing, but then you'll maybe, depending on your trackers, you might start to lose track. So I like to keep it all centralized, with Prowlarr managing most of those sort of tweaks, if you will. So I don't do add or remove only, meaning it only syncs once. And then if for example, you remove the indexer from, let's say by removing one of the tags, then it will remove that indexer. That's all it does. It adds it or it removes it. It doesn't, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't do a full sync in terms of and in terms of overriding the in-app settings that you would use. So for example, if I were to go into high-end settings, whatever settings I have under here for, let's say, seed ratio, etc., all that stuff, time, whatever Prowlarr can also set, it will not override it if it's add or remove only. So kind of don't really mess with that per app. I just keep it full sync. But so that's the coverage of what tags mean when it relates to Prowlarr and Radarr and Sonar. So TV only tracker, I only have set to Sonar. Let's focus again on movies and movie only stuff. I utilize the Radarr logic. So if we look at the Radarr logic here, we see the logic is as follows. 1, quality, custom format score, protocol for delay profiles. You can kind of, negate that a little bit. Indexer priority, indexer flags. So I obviously rely on quality. Everyone's going to rely on all of these, but the way I have it definitely set is when it gets to indexer priority, I want to manage how it creates a logical workflow. And that's what you want to be thinking when you're setting up your trackers and giving them priorities, is what is the logic that I want? Okay. So I'm going to explain the logic that I have, and then you might be able to better create it for yourself. As you can see, we have BitTorrents, a public tracker. This tracker also allows donations, etc. It's considered a pretty casual tracker. Nothing so crazy. However, just because it's a casual tracker does not mean it doesn't have torrents from a lot of these high-end trackers. So why should I grab the torrents from the high-end trackers? Of course, ignoring instances of speed and all that and cedar quality. I get that. But if you can save yourself the download and save yourself from blowing your ratio out on a high-end one, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you use it where you can on, let's say, a casual tracker where you can maybe donate to get a bunch of upload credit? Or obviously it's a lot easier because you're not competing with like 5,000 seed boxes. So that's an obvious thing that you want to take advantage of. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's quite smart. So here, let's say anytime I query for a movie, it's going to look at what's in priority number 1. Okay. So ignore this first one for a second. Just ignore that. Bear with me. Just focus on anything below nya.si. nya.si we're going to ignore, and so are we going to ignore TV only tracker. So technically anytime I make a query, it would go to BitTorrents first. If BitTorrents did not have it, it would then go to a movies only tracker, which, I have a good buffer in, but again, it's like, may not be the best, and I don't want to necessarily blow that out. Now, if the movies only tracker doesn't have the movie, or let's assume the movie release it between, let's say, BitTorrents and the movies only, in this case you can't see it, it would be 3, it would be in between these two. Remember, there's one in between these that you can't see because I had to add it in Radarr only manually, so that there could be something to do with the site specific stuff for, let's say, Ultra HD bits. But anyways, pretend Ultra HD bits or movies only tracker is here on this 3 line. So remember, if all else is the same, indexer priority will take precedence. So I wanted to grab it from BitTorrents if it can. And then Crossseed will probably cross-seed it to the third movies only tracker and help me build a ratio. Now, assuming it's not on those, then it will go to the high-end one. And the high-end is like the last resort. You know, it's not high-end because, oh, it's one of those super hard to get in trackers. It's high-end because maybe my ratio is really hard to maintain there. So I consider that high-end, or, you know, it's not indicative of me saying it's a high-end tracker or not, but that's how I refer to it. So my high-end one is the last one. Interestingly enough, now going back to this first one, I realized that the high-end one has a lot of internal groups. Okay, it has a lot of internal groups, and it has a lot of Freeleech only torrents, whether it's, you know, completely Freeleech, half Freeleech, etc. So I set up a first tracker here. So this would technically be the first one over BitTorrents. If this high-end Freeleech tracker, if this high-end tracker has a Freeleech only version of a super high quality movie that the other trackers, like for example, the movies only tracker has, why wouldn't I grab the Freeleech only one? Think about it. So this makes sure that I'm taking advantage of that. Now, if this wasn't there, okay, then what would happen is that based on the priority, it would grab it from the movies only tracker, which would probably not be Freeleech. And then all of a sudden we'd see the high-end one did in fact have that same file as a Freeleech. So now you've needlessly downloaded it from a website when you didn't have to. So that's why this high-end Freeleech only one is there. So again, for my high-end, I have, let's say, encode. I believe I have encode, HEVC, H.264, Blu-ray, WebDL, and internal. Okay, so that's the high-end. And high-end Freeleech obviously has the internal and also has the flag of Freeleech only torrents. There is a setting where you can hit search and you can search what releases are coming up. I did this a few times to kind of see what it was grabbing in terms of a query. What is a query? When you enter a movie, it checks all these things, right? So keep in mind, TV only tracker, while it might have movies, I only kept it for Sonar because we want to limit the number of queries that we're making to any of these trackers. We don't want to needlessly make queries because remember, it can kind of look like you're kind of attacking the website and you could get banned. So you don't want to do that. So you want to always be careful and methodical in which apps are syncing a certain indexer. And of course, I did a high-end Freeleech only, but because I restricted it to Freeleech, it's not going to hit the tracker for a lot of queries, right? There won't be like 400 torrents it has to look at. So that shouldn't be a big issue in terms of API query limitations. Now, one thing I do recommend is obviously doing the search thing, looking at the list, making sure it's catching, releases that you want it to catch. This is just a starting point for you guys. I'm just trying to show you what I do. But the way I came across and the way I set this up was I looked at every website for, let's say, a certain movie. I looked at like the releases manually per website, and I made sure that whatever was happening in these reflected the releases that I was seeing. So I was like, oh, where's this release? How come I'm not seeing that? Oh, it's because I didn't put something in the indexer setting, such as perhaps category movies, and I accidentally chose the category TV shows, or maybe the minimum seater count I accidentally put to 6 or something like this. So now we covered syncing. Again, I keep it all centralized. I let Prowlarr sync everything. If I change one setting, it will change across all the instances. That's what I want. Now, you can obviously go into each one of these and you can certainly change the things Prowlarr doesn't touch. So Prowlarr doesn't touch indexer flags. So you can definitely add those indexer flags there. But obviously seed, seed ratio, time, limit, query limit, all that stuff will get overwritten. Unless you do add or remove only for the sync mode in the program for the applications. So again, you would do that like this, manage applications, choose it all, hit edit. And right here, sync level disabled. So no change. Disabled would just disable any and all sync, add and remove only, and full sync. So that's kind of how you can quickly do that. But I really wanted to kind of show you guys a more personal example. So let's take a look at how this workflow works in terms of the priorities. If we arrange this by Blu-ray 1080p, we can kind of see all these releases. These negative 10,000s won't apply. So a lot of these BitTorrent ones will just get thrown out. But here's the fascinating part. We have 3 BitTorrents, Sashimi, right? And then we have movies only tracker as one thing here. And then of course we have high end here. That's also a good candidate. Notice they're all Blu-ray. Okay. So in this instance, it would grab this Sashimi one, which is fine. But imagine if this Sashimi one said Perfection HD, right? So then you would save on that instance. But let's say, for example, and you can see here the history shows that I manually grabbed it. So yeah, for this one, for anime in particular, I don't use nya.si anymore. It's just a lot of dead torrents, a lot of low quality stuff. I just stopped using it, especially for movies. So I don't do that anymore, which is why you don't see nya.si on this result any longer. Just clutters it. But in this instance, it would grab pretty much the BitTorrents one. Here's one other example of where the priorities really work in terms of how I set it up. So again, here I set the priorities, assuming everything else is the same. We can see here BitTorrents, movies only, and high end. Now, pay attention to this here. The age of the BitTorrents one is 207 days, but the high end trackers, the movies only and the high end, 600 days ago. That's crazy. So it came to BitTorrents way later. Now, again, of course, the speeds on these trackers for new releases is going to be quicker, right? Higher quality seeders, et cetera, et cetera. But assuming you're trying to just update your library's older titles, you know, of course you want BitTorrents to be the first thing that it grabs from. Because again, with BitTorrents, you could probably donate. It's easier to keep a higher ratio where you're not competing with a bunch of seed boxes on these higher, compared to these movies only and higher end trackers. So this is another beautiful example where it will grab it from BitTorrents. Let's say it's not on BitTorrents, then it will definitely grab it from movies only, and then high end. But remember, if the high end one does end up having it, because sometimes a lot of these movies only trackers will have internal groups from high end as part of its website, right? People are sharing back and forth to people who aren't on both sites. Then realistically, you can make sure that the high end, which from my experience, I noticed on this particular tracker, for example, Ultra HD Bits has more Freeleech torrents, so I keep that as the high-end Freeleech only at the very top. So it's going to be the first one, BitTorrents second, movies only third, right in between 2 and 4, then high-end. So that's something to be really aware of, is that this is how you can leverage priorities and these websites without breaking the ratio on any one particular website. And that's how you're going to really do it. You're going to make sure that you use the search bar to make sure you're getting the releases you want, to really see, for example, so if I type, Emma, right? Emma 2020. And then I say, okay, show me the results from, for example, high-end, or let's say BitTorrents and you know, show it to me for the high-end Freeleech only. It's search. Here's an example with Princess Mononoke. As we can see, the high-end Freeleech only version is the one that ranks on the top. Notice how it will grab the Freeleech from the high-end site. Whereas on the movies only tracker, it's the same release. But it will not grab it from here. And that's kind of the benefit of why I separated it out. If I didn't, imagine if I was trying to keep my ratio, I was being more careful about the high-end one that I'm, you know, in terms of what I'm grabbing on it. Then the high-end one would be below movies only tracker, and then all of a sudden movies, just because movies only tracker have more buffer in, I'm neglecting the high-end Freeleech only stuff. So that's where I split it out. And I think everyone should do something like this because it's smart. You should take advantage of Freeleech, especially for releases that are Freeleech there. Now, obviously, can you go a step further? Could you maybe do one for each for the movies only tracker, make a movies only Freeleech? Probably, but it's unlikely that the high-end tracker wouldn't have that torrent. At least that's the assumption. But you could certainly do a movies only basically movies only tracker Freeleech indexer on Prowlarr as well. And I might do that myself after this video is over, because I just kind of thought about that, like, yeah, I should do that, shouldn't I? But then again, the movies only tracker doesn't have a lot of Freeleech, so it's kind of like it's kind of a pointless thing for that, at least in my case, though that's something you can consider. Now, in terms of movies, in terms of what I monitor, obviously my library is set up to grab Blu-ray 1080p for everything, for every movie, period. Am I always consistent in what I keep in my library? No. So for example, I have, let's say, a movie like Uncut Gems, which I don't give a shit about Adam Sandler. So I could care less about having Blu-ray for that and the highest quality. So in that case, with that, I would unmonitor the movie. So here, for example, you see On Your Mark, this movie here, I've unmonitored it because I grabbed a Remux 1080p, whereas my profile is usually only set in terms of Blu-ray 1080. It's only the highest should be Blu-ray 1080p. There is no Remux 1080p is all the way down here, and it's unselected. So as you can see, either I could bring it all the way up, which is something Trash Guide recommends. Well, actually, they don't recommend this. They recommend whichever one you want should be all the way up. So in this case, Blu-ray 1080p. But you can certainly do it this way, and then it won't. And we covered this in the 2 Sonar and Radar Instance videos. It won't erase, or maybe it was a trash video. I don't check one of them, but it won't get rid of it if it's already on the drive as a Remux. But just in case, I unmonitor those movies because, hey, once I have the Remux, what the hell do I need the Blu-ray for? You know, I mean, assuming it's not a super big movie. So in this case, On Your Mark, it's a 2 gig movie. How much space am I really going to save with the Blu-ray? So I unmonitor that. Another one I unmonitored is My Neighbor the Yamadas. So there's a 720p Control HD copy of it that I really like. Control HD is a high-end group. But I don't want to just grab a random 1080p's group. So in this instance, I said, okay, unmonitor it. Remember, monitoring is for when a torrent gets uploaded on the website and then the RSS picks it up and then Radarr processes it. That's all it is. That's all it's for. So if I'm happy with what file I have, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be happy with it forever, I unmonitor it. It's pretty much just that simple. That's the reason you might see some movies unmonitored on my end here. One thing I want to cover here that I also made in kind of separate away from Trash Guide. Trash Guide's great and all, but I realized a lot of times like Web 10 DL 1080p and WEBRip were in the same. They were pretty much like this, right? They were like kind of like that. They were kind of like this, right? Which means if there was a torrent and all the custom format was the same, the quality was the same, given the seeder count, it can happen. It might grab the WEBRip. So I had instances where I was grabbing the WEBRip, even though I know that there might be a WebDL, which is higher quality. So I don't consider these the same quality. I just don't. So I separate those out. I hit edit groups, ungroup, and then drag WebDL over and hit done edit. And then I hit save, just like that. So that's one of those things that I did the same for WebDL 480p, and that anything else that I thought would probably be an issue. So that's something that you guys may want to do on your end as well, is do it this way. If you prefer WebDLs, really utilize those quality, the profiles, the quality profile qualities list, and separate those out. One more thing I wanted to cover is interactive search. I love interactive search because it's more specific and it gives more control over what you're grabbing. Not to say that the search movie tab can't give you that if you make sure that your torrent grabbing logic is very safe and sound, but at the same time, it's just one of those things that I like to do. I like to look at the interactive search. One of the things I want to cover is the filters here. This is pretty neglected. It's kind of in the corner. I wish there was a color there. A lot of the times the focus tends to be in the center left here, and then you kind of forget this exists. I love this because I found myself doing a lot of, trying to, if there's a lot of these ones, you can kind of organize. You could be like, all right, which one can I grab? And, kind of doing this thing where I was like going to the custom score, seeing what would happen, all this stuff. And then kind of wondering, oh, well, why didn't it grab it from this indexer, but down here, oh, it's because it's a 720p, not a 1080p Blu-ray. So a lot of the times, just to get a little confusion, I have, for example, the movies only tracker filter. So if I do this, it'll only show from the movies only tracker filter, or the custom format score where I set it to greater than 0. So if you do custom filter, you can add filters like this, but each filter can have multiple conditions for what you want. So, oh, I want it to show only something with seeders that is greater than 10, for example, and I don't want, the size. I want the size to be less than or equal to 18 for this movie. Just an example of all the little kind of nooks and things that you can set. So in this instance, I don't really set seeders. I just want to see whichever ones is greater. I don't care if the seeders is like 3 or 4. Usually with a higher end private tracker, 3 or 4 is enough. So then I hit custom format score. See, notice, boom, instantly the list got crunched down very quickly in terms of custom format. Obviously, this is for greater than 0. So this is instantly I can see, is there something that is a release that has the custom format I want? Because remember, custom format is preferred. It's a way to really tweak which releases you're grabbing. And if you need more details on custom formats, go ahead and check out the trash guide video where we really get into what custom formats is as it pertains to really trash guide, how to use it inside of Radarr, and then of course how to sync those custom format cards using Notifier. So check out the Notifier video as well. But all the links are under the 2 Sonar and Radarr instance video, so check that out. Anyways, guys, I hope all of this was helpful to you in terms of navigating Radarr more, how to really leverage Prowlarr and Radarr together to really make essentially your grabbing experience a lot better for various sites. Take care, guys. See you on the next one.